Alrighty, everybody. It is currently Monday, August 25th, 2025, and I'm coming at you live from a Palantir private prison that I was put into for burning the Israeli flag. That's, that's where I'm coming at you from. And that is probably how I'm going to start off this episode a little bit. Hey, this episode is about politics. All right, we're talking about the creation of a country here, more specifically Singapore, which is a country. It's not, you know what I mean? It's not a country, but it is technically a country, right? It's like a dude who's like a quarter black, right? Being like, I'm biracial. That's what Singapore is in terms of it. In terms of it being a country, I would say that's a good analogy for Singapore. But before we get into that, man, 20 years from now, when you're living in a Amazon private housing development that's just, a series of concrete boxes, one after the other, in the middle of nowhere, and it's 195 degrees outside, and the power just cut out. So your AI Palantir drones aren't spying on you anymore, and your Chat GPT child, your child GPT asks you, when your child GPT asks you, when did it all start going like this? You're gonna point to this moment, man, because it's insane. It truly is insane. And what this moment should be, it's not gonna be that, right? What this moment should be is we as Americans, uniting together to say, hey, this is an objective, right? By the definition of the Supreme Court, right, and by the definition of the Constitution, this is an objectively an objective uh encroachment onto the First Amendment. And instead of we as Americans, recognizing this moment and saying, hey, we need to come together, right, left, white, black, it doesn't matter. We need to, have some peace and reconciliation and come together to fight against this. Instead of this being that, it's going to be a bunch of libs being like, ha ha, you're so stupid. I told you so. You're so stupid. Ha ha ha. You voted for him. Ha, this is what you get for voting for him. Ha ha, you're so dumb. You idiot. You really didn't think this was going to happen. Ha ha, you're so fucking stupid. Right? And just not even moral grandstanding from the left. It's going to be like just a peanut gallery of monkeys just pointing at you and laughing, just being like, ha ha, ha ha, you're so dumb, you're so dumb. And if you don't think you're that person and you're a liberal, you are that person, right? And what I'm about to say applies to pretty much all Republicans too, and maybe not liberals, but Democrats certainly. Because you can have liberal beliefs and then also be like, yeah, man, I'm not gonna. This isn't the moment to take the moral high ground. This is a moment to be like, fuck it, man. You guys did what you did. You voted for the guy. Who gives a fuck? Let's try to figure this out, right? There might be liberals out there doing that, but there's certainly not, party line Democrats out there doing that. What the party line Democrats are going to do is they're going to tune into CNN and they're going to watch Don Lemon be like, these people, can you believe this? Just like, or like, watch Stephen Colbert's Instagram because he doesn't have a TV show. They're going to pull up his Instagram and Stephen Colbert is going to be like, can you believe these MAGA tards? Sorry, is that politically incorrect? That's what's going to be coming from the left. And then what's going to be coming from the right is just them being like, no, we're not dumb. You guys are the dumb ones. This isn't even, you don't even know what the First Amendment is. You don't even believe in the Second Amendment. So how do you believe in the First Amendment? Like, that's what's going to be coming from the right. And it's just going to be two troops of baboons just like screeching at each other instead of human beings behaving in any rationality and coming together and being like, fuck it, man. We're in this situation. Doesn't matter whose fault it is. It is what it is. And choosing to come together. It's like if the Titanic was sinking and everyone was pointing at each other, just being like, this is fucking your fault that we ran into the iceberg, right? It would be like if the passengers on the Titanic, instead of, getting the lifeboats down and being like, fuck it, let's just get everyone off this thing. Instead of them doing that, it would be like if they just went after the captain, you know what I mean, and threw him overboard while the ship slowly sank into the water. That's what it would be like. And it's very upsetting because that is precisely what's going to happen. Now, maybe the order gets struck down. I don't know how that shit works. Maybe it's the Supreme Court, maybe it's Congress. I have no idea, but there's got to be a way to strike that shit down. Hopefully it does get stricken down. It's probably not because Republicans control the Congress and they're not going to go against their big daddy Trump and more importantly their real big daddy Israel. They're not going to be going against them at all. So, yeah, it's probably not going to get if it's up to Congress, that shit's staying in place. If it's up to the Supreme Court, honestly, it's probably staying in place too. So, yeah, it's fun. It's a fun moment to be in. And, it just shows they did it, dude. Whatever group you want to blame this on, some people will blame it on the Jews, some people will blame it on, the Republicans, some people will blame it on the Democrats. Whatever group came up with the idea to split America in half and just have them have 50% of this country mortally hate the other 50%, whoever the fuck did that, dude, we got to give that guy a round of applause real quick. Hey, I don't know if you guys can hear that. I was clapping. I was actually hitting my thigh. We got to give that guy a round of applause. Whoever came up with that, or whatever group of people came up with that, I don't know. Maybe it was the fucking lizard people. Maybe David Icke was right about that one. We got to give it up to them because they did a fucking A+ job, right? Right? Because and maybe this is just a social media thing. I don't know. I doubt that it is just a social media thing. But if you go on social media right now, and you find a video, which it's not going to be hard to find, and you find a video talking about Trump banning the burning of the American flag as well as some other flags. He had a very interesting choice of flags that he wants to prevent people from burning and disrespecting. But if you find a TikTok about that, you are going to see what I'm talking about. You're going to see precisely what, and even before that, even before, I looked at the social media comment sections, I knew this was going to happen, right? And anyone that's lived in this country for the past 20 years, right? Anyone that's spent a moment in this country within the past 20 years will tell you that is what's going to happen, or that was going to be the reaction. It's not difficult to find out, man. It's like, seriously, they did this about Ukraine and Russia. They did this about the fucking vaccine. They do it about goddamn everything, right? Instead of being like, hey, we fucked up, or you fucked up. Who cares who fucked up? The situation is fucked. Let's try to fix it. Instead of doing that, right? Instead of being an adult, they are laughing at each other and clapping like fucking circus monkeys. It's hey, we get what we get. Hey, and look, there's a positive side to every situation. If I was you, I'd start stockpiling American flags because hopefully people are going to start buying American flags and burning them as a form of protest against this, as they should. Usually I'm against that gay ass protest shit, right? Because I used to not like the burning of the American flag as a form of protest just because I was like, there's just something so gay about it, right? But now that it's actually illegal, or I don't look, maybe I fell for the fucking, the lib news or whatever. I really don't think I did. It's like the White House said it's kind of illegal to burn the American flag. So, yeah, now that it's illegal, that's actually a sick ass form of protest. But before that, it was just like, what are you doing, right? So yeah, it went from very gay to now kind of sick, dude. Like if you're burning the American flag now, before it was like, yeah, I'm a punk, and it's like you're not a punk, dude. No one's gonna stop you from doing this, dude. Some fat fucking retard in overalls might come up to you and be like, "You're my cousin died for this country," right? Like that would be the extent of their reaction to you burning an American flag. But now that it's actually illegal, burning it is pretty sick, dude. That was a real big flip flop, dude. It went from, at least in my mind, just being like, what, what, It's like when fucking players burn like Lamar Jackson's jersey or whatever because he didn't, immediately sign a deal with the Ravens. It was just like, okay, man, who gives a shit? But now that it's illegal, brother, give me the lighter fluid, dude. Pass me the fucking barbecue lighter. It's time to torch up. Right? It's time to torch this shit the fuck up. So yeah, it's a crazy flip flop. I don't know if I've ever, experienced something in my lifetime going from just complete gay, stupid nonsense to like it actually being cool, right? Like if I saw someone burn the American flag, I'd be like, hell yeah, brother. You know, that's the reaction I have when like I see someone like jaywalking across a busy intersection, just smoking a cigarette, not giving a fuck. That's I would have that same reaction to someone burning the American flag, like fuck yeah, brother, live your life. So hey, get to burning, man. Get the. It's gonna be that one mission in Far Cry 3. You know what I mean? When you pull up on the weed fields and you hit them with the flamethrower, that's hopefully what's gonna be happening to the American flag pretty soon, and people are gonna, and it's gonna be what it is. You know, someone's gonna write MAGA on one of the flags and burn it, and then all the MAGA people are gonna, get all pissy about it, and everyone's just gonna get fucking pissy at each other because no one can be an adult and just be like, okay. Like I've been in situations like that before, like with my friends, and it's just like, fuck, man, we ended up in a place we shouldn't have been, shit like that. And in those moments, just pointing fingers and being like, this is your fault. This is instead of taking action and doing something about it. Look, look, man. And if you're upset about anything that I said, you're part of the problem. All right. Look, I get it. They voted for the fucking guy. But just, you know, it is what it is. When someone crashes a car into a fucking lake, you don't go, good job, moron, and just fucking spit in their face. You go, okay, everyone, let's get out of the car. Then once we're out of the car that's fucking sinking into the lake, then we can, fucking start pointing fingers. All right? And even then, it's still not a great idea to fucking do it. All right? It's still not a great idea to play the fucking blame game about whose fault it is. It's nobody's fault. Okay? You just have to go against your base fucking human emotions and go, it's no one's fault. Let's try to figure this out. What do we need to do in order to fix this situation? And unfortunately, we're not going to do that. No one's going to do that. I'm, uh, I don't really have enough influence or power to do that. So, yeah, there might be a few people, there might be a few Republicans that are like, hey, we got. Sometimes you get got. There might be a little bit of that, and there might be a few Democrats being like, look, who cares whose fault it was? Let's try to figure this out. Or like, yeah, they did it, but they didn't really know what they were doing, right? Trump didn't run on the platform of basically eliminating an integral part of the First Amendment. He didn't run on that platform. He ran on the platform of everything is fucked right now and I'm going to fix it. That's basically the platform that he ran on. And to be fair, that's the platform most politicians run on, especially recently. Um, but that's the platform that he ran on was, hey, too many illegal immigrants, I'm going to get them out of here. There's too much, the housing market is too fucked up, I'm going to fix that. The job market is too fucked up, I'm going to fix that. That's basically what Donald Trump ran on. He did not run on the idea that we're going to make an AI database with everyone's information compiled into one big thing, and then I'm going to make everything illegal. That's it's not the platform he ran on, guys. So how about we just calm it the fuck down? Hey, everyone take a deep breath. Let's think about the situation rationally. What do we do? How do we get out of this situation? And I think Singapore is a good lesson on how to get out of these situations. More specifically, my boy Lee Kuan Yew. He had that shit really figured out. Hey, everyone read the fucking Singapore story, or no one's gonna read the book. I didn't read the book. I looked it up on the audiobook app that I have, and they didn't have an audiobook version of it, so I didn't fucking read it. I didn't listen to it. Just go on TikTok and look up Lee Kuan Lu or Lee Kuan Yew edit and just watch that and then be like, all right, fuck it. It's everyone's fault. It's no one's fault. Who gives a shit? Let's fix this thing, dude. Lee Kuan Yew, the edits are so sick, dude. It's Lee Kuan Yew being like, when I came to this city, it was a mud flat. Now it is a sparkling metropolis, saying shit like that. What was the fucking other one that he had? Whoever governs Singapore must have that iron in him. This is not a game of cards. This is your life and mine. God, man, so sick. Everyone just fucking lock in and just Lee Kuan Yew. Look, you might disagree with the guy, but he had a lot of shit figured out. Or I don't know, do what you've been doing and fucking, sit in your goddamn peanut gallery like those two, old dudes in the Muppets and just be like, idiots, you voted for Donald Trump. This is all your fault. You're so stupid. And this kind of seems like I didn't vote for fucking anyone. And also, people thinking Kamala wouldn't encroach on people's rights. Look, I don't want to play the blame game, but we were kind of shit out of luck in that situation. Hey, the situation was fucked. It was, I get it. You voted for Kamala because you thought she was going to save the country. You voted for Trump because you thought he was going to save the country. I get it both ways, guys. I understand why you did what you did. But either way, it wouldn't have fucking helped. All right, the only thing that's going to help is 1776. All right, let's come together and, instead of throwing tea into the harbor, start burning American flags. All right, and the people on the right are going to, get upset being like, my family died to protect this country and you're burning the flag of it. And it's like, they died to protect the country. They died to protect the values of this country. Let's think about it like this. They died to protect the values of this country. And one of the most important values of this country, some might argue the most important value of this country, it's why it's literally the first guaranteed right that every American has, is the right to free speech, the right to the freedom of self-expression. You know, that's what they died for. They didn't die for a fucking piece of cloth. They didn't. And if they did, fuck them. They deserve to die. Right? No. Look, rest in peace to all the soldiers that died. Maybe not all of them, but most of them. Rest in peace to most of, like 99%. That 1%, they did some fucked up shit. All right, look, hey, not blaming anyone, not saying this is anyone's fault, but they did some fucked up shit. All right, so the vast majority of soldiers that died, God rest their souls. If there's a heaven, I hope they're up there. Or if, it's a reincarnation, I hope they didn't fucking end up in India or Pakistan or something like that, right? God rest their souls, but they didn't die to protect a piece of cloth. They died to protect a series of values that created this country and made it the greatest country on earth. That's what they died to protect. And I know it's easy to conflate the two things because the American flag is often seen as a symbol of that, but also burning the American flag is, it's just as much of a symbol as the American flag, right? Burning it and leaving it alone, both of those things, at least in my mind, are equally representational of, being a symbol of America. Burning the American flag, that's a symbol of America in the sense that, look, man, I might not like it. I might think it's a little bit gay to do, but you have the right to do it. You have the freedom to do it, right? That's what this country's all about. It's about having fucking freedom. And that's what the soldiers died to protect. So when you see someone burning the American flag, and no one's listening to this, I fucking know that. I know I'm giving a speech to no one right now, and that's fine. It is what it is. It's just quelling my own mind and my own fucking fears, okay? So I know no one's listening to this, but if anyone is, please, please take away the lesson and just be like, fuck it, man. It's everyone's fault. It's no one's fault. It's my fault. It's your fault. Who gives a shit? Let's try to fix this. But yeah, just accept the fact that burning the American flag is just as much a symbol of freedom as flying the American flag is. Right? It's a symbol in the sense that it's a representation of your right to choose what you want to do with the symbol of this country. So, yeah. Sorry, everyone. Hey, look. This is the situation that we're in. Don't be fucking getting mad at each other. All right, and nothing annoys me more. And I've talked about this before, and actually in the last episode about how annoyance to me is it's the greatest emotion. Nothing overpowers me emotionally more than annoyance. Sadness maybe sometimes, dude. When my dog died, I was pretty sad, and I couldn't control my emotions there. But annoyance really is, I think it takes precedence over sadness, right? Like if I was grieving the loss of a family member and, someone cut me off in traffic, I would immediately stop crying and be like, what the fuck? You didn't even use your fucking signal. Right? That's the reaction I'd have in that situation, and just nothing annoys me more than people, rather than doing what is right, doing what makes you feel good, right? It's like abandoning your kids to do fentanyl because you really like the way fentanyl feels. Like that's kind of what you're doing here by being like, it's your fault. No, it's your fault. You're an idiot. No, you're an idiot. It's you're trying to make yourself feel good. And I get it, man. I get why people on the left are being like, everyone called us fucking bleeding heart pussies. They called us morons, all that shit. And and they disrespected us for a number of years. So I understand why it feels good to give that disrespect back to the person. I understand that, man. But it also feels good to fucking, jerk off 3 times a day. You can't be doing that. I get it. You want to. It feels good. It feels nice. It makes you happy to do that. Or it doesn't make you happy. It brings you, you know, animal pleasure to do that. It brings you animal pleasure to be like, No, you guys were wrong. You guys are the idiots." Right? Like I understand why the libs are gonna be doing what they're doing over the next, few weeks. And quite frankly, the next few weeks is all it's gonna take for people to completely forget about it. So, and then I understand why the Republicans are doing what they're doing because they felt the exact same thing for a number of years. The exact same thing. People called them morons. They said you're an idiot. They said you don't know anything about the way the world works, you know? And fuck it, I'm guilty of it. I've done the same thing to people. I've been like, "You're a fucking idiot." But to be fair, me calling I'm not bringing up like fucking points and shit. I'm just being like dumbass. That's the extent of what I'm doing. So, and I try not to do it too often because it's ultimately the least constructive thing you can do. Just calling someone an idiot, right? Unless it's like your boy, right? Unless you like really know the person that you're doing it to, and unless the person that you're doing it to really knows you. Like I can call my boy dumb, and it can have 1,000 different meanings, and he could understand all of them, right? What your boys are, all right? They just get you. But yeah, I understand why both sides are going to be doing what they're doing, but you can't. You can't be. I also understand why a fucking toddler throws a fit when he doesn't get a toy at Walmart. I understand why a toddler does that. Doesn't make what the toddler is doing right, just makes me understand it. And people are going to be like, "Oh, you're calling me a toddler or whatever." Yeah, I'm calling myself a fucking toddler too, all right? I turn into a pissy little brat sometimes as well. It's just everyone does it. I understand. God. And you have to explain it out like that. And I get why I have to explain it out like that. But still, don't be a pissy little brat about this whole thing, right? Because it's not constructive in any way, shape, or form. It's very damaging to the movement, right? Like, I don't know, being a cult leader, you don't run around calling everyone stupid, all right? To really get a good cult going, to get a nice, powerful cult going, you say, "Hey, you might be doing something wrong right now, but you can come over and join my side," all right? That's how cults get things going in there. So, yeah, man, I don't know. Just be a cult leader. Just be like, whatever. Let that shit run off your back like a duck, and then, get back to preaching your movement. And no one's going to do that. I'm not going to do that. I'm probably not going to be talking about this when I do current events because I'm going to completely have forgot about it by then. But look, stop being a little fucking chimp. Stop throwing your shit at the other fucking chimps and be a human being. Be a human being that is rational and has control over your emotions. And I understand it. The emotions are hard to control right now. You're struggling to get by. Fucking everything in your life sucks. But just for once in your life, and I'm talking to myself here too right now, for once in your life, stop being such an overly emotional pussy and put that shit to the side so that we can truly understand this situation and understand what we can do about it. Once again, talking to myself, mostly talking to myself there. Right? You know, mostly mostly speaking to myself. And not just like I'm literally only speaking to myself. No one's ever going to hear this. But fuck it. I hope they do. And sometimes all you can do is hope. But yeah, I don't know. I have nothing else to say about it. That was kind of the game plan going into this, is be like, "Hey, everyone's a pussy except for me." Why can't you guys be more like me? No, don't be more like me. Be more like a rational human being, you know, who is able to just say fuck it and try to figure the situation out, dude. Be like that. I don't care who you are, where you're from, who you voted from. Be that person, and maybe, just fucking maybe, dude. Maybe there's a slim chance out there somewhere, dude. Maybe there's a sliver of fucking hope that we can be rational human beings and fix this situation. Probably won't happen. Almost definitely won't happen. Would be great if it did. But, nah, is what it is, man. Look, or just flee the country and move to another, or do that. Either or, whatever you're thinking. I don't know. Just do that. Flee to fucking Argentina or whatever, right? I don't know. I got Argentina on the mind, in terms of what country I'm going to flee to. I don't know. Maybe that's because I'm like ethnically German, you know? Germans are kind of known for fleeing to Argentina. That's kind of, as a group, especially a certain group of Germans, it's kind of what they're known for. known for saying, "Hey, I'm gonna head down Argentini way." They're kind of known for that. Yeah, but man, do it, don't do it. No one's listening to this anyway. And even if anyone's listening to this, they're not gonna listen to me in any meaningful way, and I'm probably not gonna listen to myself in any meaningful way. But I don't know. I hope. I can listen to myself. I hope other people can listen to me and understand what I'm saying, or listen to someone else who's saying what I'm saying in a better way, in a more eloquent, intelligent way. Listen to someone else that's saying it. I just hope. I hope that can happen, dude. I don't know. We need someone to unite us. I don't know, maybe fake an alien invasion or something. Maybe that'll get the people fucking united. Probably not. Some people will be like, no, we need to do this to the aliens. No, we need to do that. We need to accept the aliens into our community and, really try to understand where they're coming from and, let their culture thrive. Even if their culture is kidnapping and eating babies. And then the other side's going to be like, don't even bother talking to them, mow them all down with a fucking machine gun. That's if aliens land in America, that is going to be the I guess political response of people in this country. Mm. Hey, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do about it? You know what I mean? Like I'm saying, Lee Kuan Yew, save us, Lee Kuan Yew, please. Please, Lee Kuan, come down from your fucking, wherever you are right now, and come save us, dude. This is not a game of cards. This is your life and mine. Whoever governs Singapore must have that iron in him. He's so sick, dude. Please, Lee Kuan Yew, save us. All right. You've been wondering about who Lee Kuan Yew is for a while. You've been wondering about what's going on in Singapore. Singapore actually has, for it being like a city state, I guess a city nation state, is that the way to put it? I don't know, but for being like a pretty small place, they've got a fair amount of history going on, and it kind of explains, we're going to get an understanding of why Singapore is kind of its own country, as opposed to like being a part of Malaysia, which, if you don't know, Singapore's just on like that. You got like Vietnam and Cambodia and shit up there, Thailand, and then the little, uncircumcised penis jets off. That's Singapore's at the tip of that thing, dude. Singapore's at the tip. That's where Singapore is, and we'll get an understanding of its history, how it came to be, as this bustling metropolis, and how it just was like its own country, right? We'll come to understand that because, with shit like the Vatican, you can understand why that's its own country. Like some of these other small countries, right? Like Liechtenstein, San Marino, Lesotho in Southern Africa, you can kind of understand how those became their own countries because they're like on mountains and shit, right? Like that's basically every other city state or like small nation that's like kind of encapsulated in another nation. All of those are, mountainous kingdoms, but Singapore, you look at Singapore, there's like no mountains going on there, right? Like Hong Kong. Hong Kong was kind of its own thing for a while because it was separated by all those mountains and shit. So you might be wondering, Singapore ain't got no mountains, dude. Ain't nobody fucking, hiking up Singapore Mountain with a Sherpa and an oxygen tank. How the fuck did they get this shit going on? We'll come to understand that over the course of this episode. So let's start off. We're going to be talking ancient history here just for a little bit, maybe like 5 minutes. And then we're going to talk about its time as a colony. It was its own colony for a while. And then we're going to be talking about it went through a few phases. All right, you know what I mean? Singapore was kind of a teenager, went through a lot of phases, but now it's kind of a grown-up adult who has like a nice IT job and a fat wife that he hates. That's where Singapore's at now. So let's try to figure out, how did Singapore get here in the first place? So the Kingdom of Singapura was founded in 1299. And Singapura versus Singapore, both pretty good names. Singapura, I think the only downside of it is it does sound a little bit Indian. It does. Look, it is a downside of it. All right, it is. Singapura does sound like maybe like an Indian god or something like that, or an Indian name. I could imagine, an Indian lass. I think this is a female name for an Indian from like Mumbai or something like that. Like I feel like I could meet an Indian person and be like, "What's that smell?" And I turn around and I go, "What's your name?" And she goes, "Singapura. I am Singapura." So it's kind of the only downside of this name. I do like it when countries' names end with an A. Maybe that's just because I'm an American, America. I like that, but like, it's one of the reasons, one of the reasons why I like Rhodesia so much. Like, I don't know, it's just ending in that A, that like hard A, or any A really. Like America, that's like a soft A, but it's still an A. So I do prefer an A ending to a country's name. Singapore, and also you got the name poor in there. I do like an A at the end of a country's name. So that's what it was started as in 1299 AD. And then during its 100 years as a kingdom, Singapura was a trading port under the influence of the Javan Majapahit Empire. So Majapahit, it was pretty unique. As if you compare Indonesia now to Indonesia then as the Majapahit Empire, they're very different, right? Because Indonesia now, it's an overwhelmingly Muslim country. It has the most Muslims of any country in the world. And then the Majapahit Empire was Hindu slash Buddhist. So I think the Indians pulled up on Indonesia, specifically Java. That's kind of where the Majapahit Empire was based. It was based on the island of Java, which I think now is the most populous island in the world. I think it has like 100 million people and it's filled with garbage and shit, you know? And that's just nobody's fault. Once again, that's kind of nobody's fault. If you put 100 million people on an island that small, it's probably not even like the top 20 biggest islands in the world. And 100 million people live there. So usually I like kind of shit on countries for having a ton of trash everywhere and stuff. This one's kind of no one. I guess it's the people's fault who kept fucking. I think it's their fault because 100 million people on an island this small it's kind of crazy. It's just filled with trash and shit and fucking children running around eating rats and stuff. Like, I think that's where Jakarta is. And Jakarta's like, look up pictures of it. It's a fucking hellhole, man. Like, at least in Brazil, like, the favelas can expand up into the mountains. And like, these people are shit out of fucking luck. It's horrible. It really is a shitty place. But the Majapahit Empire, I guess they were like the people that were like, Indonesia's where it's at, you know? And they were based out of Java, and they were a Buddhist slash Hindu empire. So they weren't Muslim yet. We're not really going to talk about the Muslim influence in Southeast Asia too much this episode. That it doesn't really, like, Singapore, even then, right, was kind of its own thing. And the reason it was its own thing is because it's an island, right? There's Singapore Island, and then there's a few other islands very close to it. So that's kind of why they had their own thing going on. And it's really like, it's not like an island that's out there. You can look up like a picture of it on a map. Like it's literally separated by a river from Indonesia. So these guys, it was pretty fucking alpha. Or not Indonesia. It's separated from Malaysia by just like this small little river. It's kind of like how Manhattan's an island, That's kind of what Singapore's got going on a little bit. It's just like a little tiny river, and somehow they were like, "Fuck off, Malaysia." And that's where some of the most powerful, like I think the Khmer Empire, uh, at one time reached down to the tip of the Malayan Peninsula, I believe it's called. Yeah. And I guess they were able to fend those guys off and basically in like the height of the Khmer Empire start their own kingdom. So Singapore's pretty fucking alpha, dude. They were like, "Hey, fuck off. I'm done with the Majapahit. I'm done with the fucking Khmers. We're doing our own thing." So, but they were heavily influenced by the Majapahit Empire. And then at the end of the 14th century, I think it was 1394, if I remember specifically, the kingdom was attacked by either the Majapahit or the Siamese. And the Siamese are, it's the old name for Thailand. So either the either, either the lady boys pulled up on these guys or the fucking Hindus came in, doing that like dance where they put their hands over their head and they're like, "Give us your island. We need Singapore." And they wanted it so bad because of it was just like this massive trading port. Like it was in a very strategic location right there at the end of the little penis tip of Malaysia. It was a very advantageous place to be able to take control of, but they really didn't. They just kind of went in there and fucked it up. At least from my understanding, like whoever it was, the Majapahit or the Siamese, whoever did it didn't like take control of it. They were just like, "Singapore, we're fucking done with you." All right. And they just came in there and dunked the nerd's head in the toilet. And then this nerd came up, eventually started their own fucking, tech company somewhere and became a billionaire. So I guess fuck off, Thailand and Indonesia. And yeah, they came in there and like I said, they didn't like take it over. They didn't, go in and like overthrow the king and like take over the ports and all that shit. They literally just destroyed it. They were just like, "We're fucking done." And this might have been a DP, dude. It might have been the Majapahit coming from the south and the fucking Siamese coming from the north, just fucking, spit roasting little Singapore in the middle, dude. Singapore might have been a Piper Perry in this situation, just getting spit roasted. Jesus. But yeah, they got by either the ladyboys in Thailand or the Muzzies, or I guess not Muzzies at that point, the Hindus slash Buddhists over in the Majapahit. Or, like I said, might have been a DP, dude. Two BBCs might have come together, put Riley Reid right in the middle, turned her into a shish kebab. Who knows? and and then after that, the leader of the Kingdom of Singapura fled and founded the Malacca Sultanate. And Sultanate that's Muslim shit. All right, that's all you got to know there. Where Magellan's slave was from. And I did an episode about Magellan's circumnavigation and his slave. What was his name? I think it was Enrique of Malacca. And obviously, that wasn't his real name. This wasn't a Muslim guy named Enrique. Yeah, Enrique of Malacca. He was uh he was basically Magellan's main slave, and they believe he was the first guy to completely circumnavigate the world because Magellan, he died fighting like Polynesians or maybe Filipinos on an island somewhere trying to spread Christianity. And obviously, Enrico de Malacca is from the Malacca Sultanate, so he doesn't give a fuck about spreading Christianity. And so after Magellan, kidnapped him from Malacca, he, as the Spanish were coming down to try to get back to Spain, they dropped him off there because Magellan was like, "Hey, if I die, drop my slave off back in fucking Malacca so he can, really get it going on." So he might have technically been the first person to circumnavigate the world. And this is where the fucking butterfly effect comes into play. Because if the Majapahit or the Siamese don't attack Singapore, then the leader never leaves to start the Malaccan Sultanate. So we might have never got the first dude to circumnavigate the world if these two fucking, BBCs didn't come together to, hit a fucking spit roast on Riley Reid. Hey, man. This history is crazy. Like, and I'm sure if you know a lot about history, then you see that shit all over the place where it's like, if this didn't happen, this wouldn't happen, blah, 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 blah. I don't know too much about history. So it's like whenever I come across a coincidence like that, it's pretty crazy. So yeah, if they never got fucking, butt rammed by the Majapahit Empire, fucking Enrique de Malacca wouldn't have never circumnavigated the world. So, hey, I mean, silver lining to everything. A dude circumnavigated the world because a tiny port kingdom in Southeast Asia was destroyed by either by some sort of Buddhist empire. So, pretty sick. Which a Buddhist empire, that's a bit of an oxymoron. It's a bit of a contradiction there. Like Buddha's whole thing. I did an episode about Buddhism. It might have been a mini-sode, I can't remember. But that whole thing was like it's all about being like not wanting worldly desires, but like an empire is predicated on having incredibly intense worldly desires, more specifically a desire to like take over the entire world. So Buddhist empire, kind of an oxymoron, pretty funny. But it's kind of true of a lot of religions, like Christianity. Jesus' whole thing was it's easy, or I don't know if Jesus said this. Maybe it was John. Someone fucking all right. Some dude at some point said it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to get into the kingdom of heaven. So a Christian empire is just as much of an oxymoron as a Buddhist empire. Uh, so yeah, eh, we got the first dude to circumnavigate the world from a tiny kingdom in Southeast Asia being destroyed. And look, maybe it would have happened anyway, but still, pretty sick. And other dudes that were part of Magellan's circumnavigation did end up getting back to Spain. So, but still, this first dude wouldn't have had it going on like that if they didn't decide to go in there and fuck him up. So, pretty interesting fact there. And some ports, we're moving on here, some ports still remained in Singapore until the Portuguese burned it down in the early 1600s. Dude, this is just a trend going on in Singapore. I don't understand it at all. Because Singapore, it's just like this tiny nation, right? It's not, it never reached the size of like the Venetian Empire. The Venetian Empire, or maybe not empire, kingdom, state, whatever it was. Like the Venetians, you think of Venice now as like just the city, but the Venetians, they controlled a lot of area in northeast Italy for a while. But like Singapore never had that. Like even at the height of the kingdom of Singapura, it never it never had it going on like that, right? It wasn't like some big fucking empire and they destroyed the capital city of it, Singapore. It was like no, it was just like this tiny little like trading and I'm sure they didn't like control that much trade. Like there's plenty of other ports around there. There's Hong Kong. I'm sure Jakarta has a number of ports in it. Like I don't know if Kuala Lumpur, I think Kuala Lumpur's pretty inland, but like there was plenty of other ports around there. They just like liked fucking with Singapore. First it was either the Majapahit or the Siamese, and then it was the Portuguese. And the Portuguese burned it to the ground apparently. So they yeah, they fucked it up. Poor little Singapore in there. I would be Kuan Yew too, or Lee Kuan Yew too. I'd be like, we're fucking done with all your guys' bullshit, dude. You burned us down twice for no reason, and then you didn't even bother to like take us over and like take over our ports and then become a big trading empire. You just came in here and fucked us up. The Ultimately, someone did come in there and like take it over and make it an important port in Southeast Asia, but we'll get to that in a second. I'm just looking up Kuala Lumpur right now because I think it's inland, which is pretty funny for Kuala Lumpur to be inland just because it's like I think it's the capital of it's the capital of Malaysia, which a lot of Malaysia is on like the island of Borneo, right? Like they're completely surrounded by sea, you know, with not a whole ton of land, and they still decided to build their their capital inland, which look, yeah, maybe that's like it's kind of near the ocean, but it's not as close to the ocean as you might think it is. Um yeah, it's just funny that they decide. It's like if Hawaii, if Honolulu was like on top of a mountain somewhere. That's basically what Kuala Lumpur is. It's like you're surrounded by ocean, man. Build your fucking capital city on the ocean. But maybe they saw what was happening to Singapore and they were like, dude, we're not having fucking any of that. Build that shit in the goddamn mountains. Maybe that's what these guys were feeling after watching the Portuguese burn that shit down. So they came in, fucked it up, and then in 1641, the small island nation would go on to be ruled by the Dutch. For and the Dutch really were the ones that like turned it into an important port, but they didn't like develop it like that. And obviously, who do you think came in there and really developed that shit and really got that fucking, really got it going in there? What empire do you think would do that? Britannia, dude, the British Empire. Say what you want about the British Empire, they did some shit, man. They really got things going in a lot of places, right? Australia, America, Canada, not so much, but like Singapore uh, owes a lot of credit to the British Empire. Not too much credit. We'll get, we're gonna get into some unsavory things. Really, nothing that bad, right? No, like ethnic cleansing. No, they weren't putting dudes in buildings and like burning the buildings. They weren't doing any of that shit. They weren't the nicest to Singapore, but they really didn't fuck them over that bad. So you can hate the British Empire and stuff like that, say they killed all these native people, which they did, but they got things going on in Singapore. So I'm sure Singapore has a slightly different opinion of the British when compared to a lot of other countries. Like Singapore, as it is today, I don't think it would be as good as it is today without the British Empire. I'll say that much. And this is just kind of one example of many. There's many other examples of countries getting really fucked over by the British Empire. But look, you got to take them where you can get them. All right, the British really did help out Singapore a whole ton. So let's talk about what was going on in Britain. And it's kind of confusing. We'll talk about it. So the British governor Stamford Ruffles arrived to Singapore in January of 1819. My boy Ruffles pulled up and he was like, "Do you want barbecue or fucking sour cream and onion? Let's start a country." the boy, the boy Stamford Ruffles, which that sounds like a Mr. Bean character name. Stamford Ruffles. Tell me that doesn't sound like someone Mr. Bean would meet on one of his fucking little misadventures somewhere, dude. Stanford Ruffles, fucking not even Russell, dude. Ruffles, goofy ass fucking name. Pulled up in January of 1819. I think it was January 29th. So just at the end of January of 1819, he pulled up and he was like, "Fucking Ruffles, dude. People have been bullying me for my entire life for my last name, dude. They kept they kept talking about the LeBron James chip, which the LeBron James Ruffle chips are good. They're like spicy cheddar. They give you insane diarrhea, right? They're not like super spicy, but they still give you insane diarrhea, but they're good as shit. So, of course, everything LeBron does is good. And Stanford Ruffle I, I'm trying to like give the guy a boost by saying Russell instead of, or maybe it's Raffles. I don't know. Fucking, I'm going with Ruffles because I think that's funnier, but it might be Raffles. I do have really bad handwriting. But this dude was just getting roasted his entire life for his fucking last name, whether it's Raffles or Ruffles. It was not a good situation for our boy Stamford. And Stamford, I can say with certainty, as shitty as my handwriting is, I can guarantee you Stamford is this dude's first name. Uh, yeah, I think it is Raffles, and I just can't read my own handwriting. So Raffles recognized that it would be a good port and decided to overthrow the man who technically ruled Singapore. So I guess at this time they were technically independent of the Dutch, but the Dutch, they were the ones who still fucking, they still ruled it, right? It was kind of like when the Majapahit, like when the Kingdom of Singapore was its own thing, but the Majapahits were like, "Nah, dude, you're fucking under our thumb." And it's kind of crazy that like Singapore survived this long as like this tiny little city state, right? It managed to keep a certain national identity despite the fact that it was ruled over by so many different empires, right? You had the Majapahit, I guess the Portuguese didn't really rule over it. They kind of just completely destroyed it. But we'll count them in the list. So you get the Majapahit, the Portuguese, kind of, but not really, the Dutch, and then the British, and they managed not super well, but like pretty well to keep a bit of a national identity. So good on Singapore for doing that. I don't think a lot of other places would be able to do it like that. And it's so tiny, man. It's incredibly small. And over the course of, I mean, 1299 to now, that's what, 130 years almost, or not 130. Jesus Christ. Am I retarded? Like 730 years. It managed to kind of keep its own national identity. So good on Singapore. And so our boy Raffles pulled up and he performed a soft coup, and the British gained de facto control on February 6th, 1819. You know, it's kind of one of those things like the paperwork wasn't fully filled out, but like the British had it going on now. They, I'm trying to remember exactly what they did. They told the dude, they overthrew one dude, put another dude in, and the dude they put in was like, they were like, "Hey, dude, we'll give you $5,000 a month or something like that." And they were like, "Just fucking do what we tell you to, all right?" You guys are kind of fucked either way. You're kind of sandwiched. Like at the time, Indonesia was like ruled by the Dutch, so you're kind of in a shitty situation here, all right? And I'm sure the French. I know the French controlled a lot of Indochina. I think the British might have also controlled Malaya at the time, which Malaya is the same as Malaysia. I guess they just took out the S and the I for some reason. I guess they just took that shit out of there. So they were kind of in a shit situation, and so the British were like, "Hey, you guys know you're fucked. We know you're fucked. How about we just keep things peaceful and you let us trade tea and spices out of here?" And also, they grew a lot of spices as well, which is kind of crazy for such a small place. They had a pretty diverse agricultural economy for such a small place. So I mean, once again, Singapore, in spite of all the odds, it's Buster Douglas, dude. Singapore is Buster Douglas. Well, Buster Douglas got down by Mike Tyson. He got back up and he started throwing shots. All right, I need you to be like Singapore. I need you to be like Buster Douglas, dude. When it knocks you down, get back up and start throwing shots. They literally burned it to the ground. And Singapore was like, "Nope, we are coming back." I don't know what a Singaporean accent is. It's probably pretty close to Chinese, which we'll talk about why that is in a little bit. So, by 1826, Singapore and its other islands were officially absorbed by the British Empire and placed under the control of British India. And this is where shit, at least for me, gets really confusing because British East India, right? When India was part of the British Empire, it was part of the British East India Company, which I think that was just the British being like, we don't officially want to put you guys in the empire, so we're gonna say that the British East India Company rules you guys. But like the British East India Company was basically part of the British government, right? I'm sure they had like their own autonomy and their own freedom to make decisions and stuff like that, but they were part of the British Empire. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like, I don't want to put a label on it. You know, India, I don't want to like say you're like, part of my empire or whatever, because I don't like putting labels on things. That's basically what Britain did to India and Pakistan and like Bangladesh and Singapore as well, I guess. Now, they were like, you're not technically part of our empire. All right. So we're going to put you guys under control of the British East India Company. And I'm sure they did it for like logistics as well. Right. Like Southern Africa, you got South Africa, Zimbabwe. I don't think the British ever controlled Namibia, but Botswana, Lesotho, all that shit. And then Zambia, Nyasaland, or not Nyasaland, Malawi. Uh, all those countries used to be part of like the British Empire, but they were technically part of the British South Africa Company. And I think they just did that because they just like gave power to other people because they themselves didn't want to have to like manage all that bullshit, and they just like collected taxes from these companies. I think that's kind of what went on here. Not exactly fucking sure though, so don't quote me on it. But they were basically part of the de facto. They were part of the British Empire. You can say whatever you want about it. They were part of the British fucking Empire. And so during the late or to mid to late 19th century, the colony was flooded by Chinese immigrants who would work on its plantations. And mostly in the 1800s, which I don't know why I flip back and forth between saying like the 1600s and like the 17th century. I don't know why I do that, but I don't know, maybe it's just to throw some different words in there. If you repeat the same words over and over, people are going to get a little bit bored with it. Or maybe I hypnotize them and they love my podcast and they listen to me forever. Probably not though. Probably, probably not. And so at this time in the 1800s, the main plantations they had going on were like spice plantations. I don't think they grew any tea there. I think it was mostly spices. Uh, yeah, I think it was all spices at the time. Later, They would get rubber going on. I think especially after the First World War, they started growing a lot of rubber trees there, which I think that's even how rubber today is made. I think there might be like synthetic rubbers out there, but like a ton of rubber nowadays is still made with like the sap of trees, which is fucking insane to think about. I don't, maybe it's because I'm retarded that I think it's crazy that rubber still comes from trees. It's like, dude, we figured out how to make plastic with like petroleum byproducts. Like we can't figure that out with rubber. I'm sure we have at some point. I'm sure I'm completely wrong about it, but I do, as far as I know, a lot of the rubber we still use comes from trees still, which kind of crazy in my opinion, dude. Like a tree made a fucking, a phone or whatever. Like there's rubber in a phone, I think, and it's like that came from a tree. It's crazy to think about, guys. I don't know. I guess I'm just kind of deep like that. Like trees are actually phones. Guess I never thought about it like no, I'm just retarded and I don't know how things work. But important thing to know, they were growing spices in Singapore in the mid to late 1800s, and the Chinese started showing up. You know what I mean? China, it was, I think it was the Qing Empire. The Qing Empire, they were kind of falling off. I think the Qing Empire officially ended in 1916, or maybe it was 1912. I can't exactly fucking remember, but yeah, it was 1912. They were in decline. They were falling off a little bit, and the Chinese were like, I'm out of here. I go to Singapore now. And they pulled up and they started fucking, making pepper or whatever the fuck they were growing there, which, by the way, pepper was like a major spice. Nowadays it's like salt and pepper. Like those are the two most basic spices, but like countries were conquered for pepper back in the day. And that's crazy. Like pepper, I don't even like black pepper that much. I prefer red pepper and white pepper and stuff like that. I don't really like the kind of like sharp smoky taste of black pepper. I prefer other spices. So it's kind of crazy that they were out here like burning cities to the ground to be like, let me get that fucking black pepper. I don't even put black pepper on eggs. I put fucking that Tony Chachere's Creole seasoning, which I'm sure has pepper in it. But they were burning shit down back in the day. They were like, we're gonna we're gonna destroy a few ethnic groups in order to fucking, so our eggs taste slightly better. That's what they had going on back then. And the Chinese were like, we'll fucking help you do it, dude. They got in there and they started cutting pepper. So, and tons of Chinese immigrants or migrants or slaves, maybe. They might have been slaves. This is still like the 1800s. And I guess the British Empire did technically outlaw slavery at this time, but they were slaves. Some of these guys might have been slaves. I'm pretty sure they were immigrants, right? Because at the same time, a fuck ton of Chinese people around the same time, maybe a little bit earlier, a fuck ton of Chinese people were coming to the American West to build railroads and shit. So I think people were just leaving China being like, the fucking party's over, dude. No more empires, no dynasties. I'm getting the fuck out of here, which I do find like this era of Chinese history to be very interesting, specifically because I read a book called The Good Earth by Pearl S. Buck, which one of the most amazing. It's my favorite book ever. Read it. It's nice and short. It's very easy to read. It's for like eighth graders. It's it's like top of the list in terms of what you get like middle school students to read. But I fucking love it, man. It's a really good book with a really good story. So very interesting that the Chinese were pulling up to Singapore to get the black pepper going on. So they pulled up and did that. I'm assuming because the Qing dynasty was kind of collapsing in on itself. So, and now we're kind of jumping ahead a little bit to the First World War. So after the First World War, the British built a naval base in Singapore, which had the largest dry dock and the third largest floating dock in the world. So this is what I mean when I say the British Empire, they get a little bit of credit here, dude, because Singapore, very tiny country, and at this time, very tiny colony, even though they were surrounded by the Malayan economy or Malayan colony. Fuck. I'm very tired right now, dude. I worked a lot today. It's almost 10 p.m., which for me that's bedtime, dude. 10 p.m. If I'm not asleep by 10 p.m., dude, I need some warm milk and honey, dude. I need to I need to snooze off. I need to get my fucking Ebenezer Scrooge hat going on and just drift off into sleep. Just me, 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 me. But we got to give the British a little bit of credit here. built the largest dry dock and the third largest floating dock in the world, for this tiny little place. But like I said, very strategic point. Very strategic point in Southeast Asia. It's just right on the penis, right there, tip of the penis. So shit that's coming down from China basically has to go by Singapore. So right there, pretty good place to build a port. And then stuff coming out of Indonesia, they also probably need like a nice little truck stop in Singapore. Singapore might have been like the Love's truck stop of countries. Maybe that'll be the title of this episode. Singapore and Lee Kuan Yew, the loves the loves of, or maybe the truck stop of countries. That might have been what was going on here, but it was a big old truck stop, dude. It was one of those truck stops that has like a fucking, they've got a 7-Eleven and they've got like a Subway and they got like a Burger King and there's a little mall where you can buy like knickknacks and tchotchkes and stuff like that. That's what Singapore was, but like an entire country. Of that. It's not that anymore, but at this time, it's kind of what it was, dude. Singapore was kind of like, fuck, man, I'm so tired. We've been on the road for like 6 hours now. I need to stretch my legs, dude. I think I have a blood clot. Pull over, stop in that fucking Love's truck stop so I can stretch my legs real quick. That's what Singapore was at this time. So we get World War One. Now we're on to World War Two. When World War Two broke out, the British all but abandoned Singapore to defend Britain. They abandoned the huge dock they had. They left a lot of soldiers there to defend Singapore, but like Britain's never really been known for its ground forces, right? Britain's really always been known for its navy. Best navy in the world, like historically, one of, if not the best navy, I'd say the best of all time. Just if you look at it historically now, it's easily America, but at this time, the UK was arguably the best navy in the world. Maybe, maybe not. I don't really know, but at this time, that's what the fuck they were. They weren't known for like their Marines and shit like that. They were known for their naval forces, and their naval forces were like, all right, we're out of here. I know we just built this big old dock, and the funny thing about the dock is they kind of built it to defend against the Japanese. So they started building the dock in like the 20s, I think, like maybe the mid or early 20s, and they kind of were just building it nice and slow. And then in 1938, maybe it was 1937, whenever Japan invaded Manchuria, they really got shit going and they fully built up the port, and then they just immediately abandoned it. Like the whole point of this port was to help defend against like the expansion of the Japanese empire, and the British were just like, nah, we ain't doing that. And to be fair, they were under attack by the big man, the little mustache comb over guy. That guy was fucking them up a whole bunch. So they had to basically abandon Singapore and a lot of their other colonies to defend the British empires, right? The heart of the empire, or the British Isles. God damn, like I said, I'm tired. The heart of the British Empire, the British Isles. They had to defend that shit because the little mustache man, he was getting upset at him. He said, I got some I know there's no Jews in England, but I still got some fucking problems with you guys. All right, so he was over there, launching the V2 rockets and shit like that, bombing them, and the British were like, "All right, Singapore, figure it out, dude." And this is honestly probably the reason why the British lost all their colonies and why many other countries lost all their colonies as well, is because they had to like pull out of all those areas and take all the men and forces out of there in order to defend the actual heart of the empire itself. So Singapore, probably a ton of other countries exactly like this on this list. So yeah. And who do you think got up in there, dude? Who do you think went up in there and maybe taught these guys a lesson about how you shouldn't be Chinese, If you know the history of Japan, especially around this time, they did not like people who were being Chinese. They said China is asshole. Japan hit the hardest China is asshole of all time. And they tried to kill all of them, dude. They literally the Japanese, it said China is asshole, no more China, kill all Chinese. That's what they tried to kill every single one of them in and out of the country as we'll find out here soon, they're not just targeting, you know, Manchuria and northwest or northeast China. They're going after the whole fucking shebang here. They're saying all Chinese asshole. Don't trust China. China is asshole. And they did not trust China, dude. They they really, the Japanese in their heart of hearts, you know, in their tiny little fucking Asian hearts, believed truly that China is asshole. they they didn't like any of China, dude. They didn't just think that the country of China was asshole. They thought all Chinese were asshole. So yeah, they pulled up to Singapore, and we talked about how all the Chinese pulled up to Singapore to, you know, pick the pepper and all that stuff. Now they're about to really show their beliefs here. You know, their belief that China is asshole. So in 1942, 60,000 troops in Singapore surrendered to the Japanese military. A lot of these troops were actually Australian, surprisingly. I guess the British were like, you fucking idiots. First of all of you guys are in Australia in the first place because you come from a lineage of fuck ups. All right. So I guess they sent them to Singapore. They sent the Australians to Singapore to like defend it against the Japanese, and they did not do a great job because, like I said, 60,000 troops. Even if these aren't your best guys, dude. Sorry, I had to take this in out there real quick. Even if these aren't your best and brightest, 60,000 literally instantaneously just gone. Which that's also kind of on the British for putting 60,000 troops in. Like I get it, Singapore is very important. You don't want to completely abandon it, but 60,000 dudes, and like I said, Singapore is like a little island. So all the Japanese had to do was put a bunch of ships around them and be like, "All right, you guys want to surrender now?" Like that's all they had to do, right? It's not like some of these other places like Stalingrad where it's like you can still sneak out because it's land and you can just walk on land. This is water, dude. Like unless the people of Singapore are, you know, Michael Phelps and they're hitting the freestyle and the butterfly and all that shit, no one was getting out of Singapore. So 60,000 troops basically simultaneously surrendered to the Japanese Empire. And they lost in the battle over it, which it wasn't a huge, it was a pretty big battle. I think all in all, oh god, like 10,000 people were injured, 10,000 casualties, which that's what a fatality means someone died. A casualty just means you got basically. So like 10,000 casualties and then 60,000 members or troops that were basically under the British Empire were all like, all right, no more Singapore, dude. Japan, you're right. China is asshole. And then, but also Japan thought everyone else was asshole too. At the time, dude, they thought everyone was asshole. So they were not very nice to their prisoners of war. They did not follow the Geneva Conventions, really, in terms of anything when it came to their war. So 60,000 dudes surrendered at the same time, and our boy Winston Churchill said this is a quote, the worst disaster and largest capitulation in British history, dude. And imagine how shitty it must have felt to be the British Empire at the time, dude. Like, you've been going to like third world countries where people are just like banging two rocks together, you know, just eating fruit and like chilling, and then you just pull up with guns and you just destroy everyone. That's what the British had been doing for like, you know, 1900s, 400 years about at this point. They were just pulling up on dudes who had no fucking idea. Maybe not 400, but definitely 300 years at least. Just pulling up on dudes being like, "Oh, you like this land, you like living here? I hope you like living nowhere because we're going to kill you." Like the British had been doing that for hundreds of years at this point, and now they're losing to Japan, dude. Japan said, "Great Britain is asshole." Don't trust Great Britain. Great Britain is asshole. And they just pulled up and fucking wrecked it, dude. Destroyed it. They didn't destroy the like any of the cities or the buildings or the dock or anything, but like morally, they fucking destroyed the British Empire. This was like as bad as Pearl Harbor. This is way worse than Pearl Harbor, dude. Like the British, the British, if they weren't so preoccupied with Germany, they would have been dropping the nukes on Japan. You know what I mean? Because that's tough, man. Just as like a moral loss, like the British just dominating everyone. That's what the British Empire had been doing for hundreds of years at this point. And then Japan, who they just stopped being samurais like 60 years ago, basically. Like they were fighting like medieval knights 60 years ago, the Japanese were at this point. And then fucking and then they pull up and take one of your favorite colonies, dude. I'd be pretty pissed about that. I understand, they didn't destroy it and not a ton of people died, but like they fucked them up. They seriously fucked them up. And like I said, Japan really thought China was asshole. That was ultimate asshole in Japan's eyes. So later in 1942, after the 60,000 people surrendered, 5 to 25,000, which in Japan, it's probably like 50,000. Ethnic Chinese were murdered, and I swear to God, if you laugh at this name, I will kick you out of this goddamn classroom. All right, just keep in mind, tens of thousands probably of ethnic Chinese people were slaughtered, murdered in the Suk Ching massacre. Let's take a moment of silence to remember that stereotypes are sometimes earned, dude. The Suk Ching massacre, both of those words are slurs. Both of those words are fully slurs for like East Asian people. The Suk Ching massacre. I just said two slurs. I'm convinced both of those are slurs. Suk Ching, dude. A fucking an Alzheimer's patient who grew up in the 50s could not come up with something as racist as the Suk Ching massacre. That's the most stereotype. You might as well call it the Ching Chong massacre at that point. That shit is it's like the most stereotypical thing ever. Like, and I would not be calling it that. I would call it like the mega death, everyone died massacre. The Suk Ching massacre, dude. It's almost impossible to say Suk Ching without doing an Asian accent. It's almost impossible to say Suk Ching without going Suk Ching. It's almost impossible to do that. Luckily, I have the iron will of a Navy SEAL, so I can prevent myself from saying Suk Ching. But most people do not have that level of self control. Most people don't. The Suk Ching massacre. Oh my god, dude. That name in and of itself is a massacre. Suk Ching. God damn. Yeah, I mean, that sounds like something a racist dude with like a racist, like black schizophrenic on like a subway in New York would say, like, Suk Ching, get the fuck out of here, man. Give me that seat. Like that. That sounds like something a schizophrenic black dude would say on the subway of New York City while insulting a Chinese or maybe not even Chinese, just vaguely Asian person. God damn, the Suk Ching massacre. That's a tough one for the Chinese, dude. That's a double loss. They lost back to back. They lost 50,000 people, if I had to guess, dude. 25,000. There's no way the Japanese stopped there. But they lost tens of thousands of people, and then they lost when they named it the Suk Ching massacre. Tough, tough, tough one for the Chinese right there. That's an L. Maybe not the L of the century, but that's a pretty major L, right? It's like if they called the Holocaust the Oy Vey genocide. The Suk Ching massacre. The boys got it rough in World War II. That sucks for them, man. And then they became communist afterwards. Luckily, Singapore kind of became communist, but not really. We'll talk about that. So, after the Japanese surrendered, Singapore fell into chaos. I'm pretty sure it was chaos before the Japanese surrendered, but certainly afterwards, there was like, yeah, so their infrastructure had been destroyed, and thus malnutrition and disease were rampant, dude. And we're talking about this is basically a swamp that these dudes were living in, right? It was a mud flat. I mean, Lee Kuan Yew, former Prime Minister of Singapore, called it a mud flat. So I think I can call it a mud flat as well. I'm just agreeing with the guy on what this place is and was. It was just swamp, dude. The boys were down Louisiana way, basically. You know what I mean? They were going around the bayou in their fan boats. Like that's what this place is. I just watched maybe it was Planet Earth. It was something with David Attenborough, and like they still have swamp creatures living in Singapore. Like Singapore's a concrete jungle. It is a very green place, very beautiful place, but it's a pretty it's a metropolis, it's a city, and they still have like otters running around in there, dude. This place is like, it's fully a swamp. So these diseases must have been insane. People just must have been waking up with like no hands. Like that's the type of diseases that they still have those diseases in swamps. They still have those fucking diseases in America, dude. I did the current events episode and we did some local news and talked about Kansas. The Kansas had a few cases of West Nile virus this year, man. So Singapore, a literal swamp that had just been like destroyed by the Japanese. They must have been getting some insane. Everyone must have been having diarrhea everywhere. That shit must have sucked. And they weren't eating anything too, so it was just straight like watery diarrhea. Tough pull for the boys, dude. The boys have got it rough over history, and most countries have got it rough over history. So yeah, shit was fucked up. Everyone was shitting everywhere, losing their hands, fucking growing a third eye and stuff like that because the Japanese fucked it up. And they began to recover in 1947. I think this is when they started doing their rubber plantations. But once again, but Britain's lack of care during World War II made many Singaporeans turn on the empire. Fair enough, dude. I get it at this point. Like, I understand that the British, their point of view is like, dude, we built like the biggest port in the world for you guys, and then they just abandoned it. So I understand why Singapore, they got a little pissed at him. They were like, dude, the fucking Japanese came in here, said China is asshole, killed 50,000 people, and then we shit our brains out for 2 years. Right? And then you basically, once you returned here, you basically turned us into slaves by making us farm rubber trees all day, dude. I get where the Singaporeans are coming from in this scenario. There's no defense for the British Empire. Like the British Empire, they didn't even give the boys a pat on the back. They were like, "All right, time to get back to work, dude. Get back in that plantation and get us some fucking rubber." Like I understand why the Singaporeans began to turn on the empire. And they fully began to rebel in the 1950s, and this was caused by the Malayan Emergency, which I think the Malayan Emergency happened in 1963, but it was like the same root causes, basically, uh, where it was just, they were getting pissed, all right? There was a lot of tensions, 1948 to 1960, so I must be thinking of the second Malayan Emergency. I'll Google it to see if I'm right. For no reason. No one cares other than me. I just thought it started in No, I'm completely wrong. I don't know where I'm getting 1963 from, dude. I don't know. Maybe I just have JFK on my mind. But basically, the Malayan Emergency started because of the spread of communism, specifically Mao's brand of communism, to Southeast Asia. That's why the Malayan Emergency happened, and that's why the Singaporeans began to rebel. Because they were basically like, you guys are fucking us over. We're going to be communists now. And the British were like, no, you're not going to be communists anymore. We're going to fuck you guys up. And that's the Malayan Emergency. And that's basically what happened in Singapore at the time as well. So they were like, England, Britain, fuck you guys. We're not making rubber for you anymore. How about that? So Singapore was officially given self-governance in 1959. So they were still technically a colony, but they basically just like paid the British like royalties. That's basically what they were doing. I'm sure the British still had a lot of people in power over there, and also Singapore, the British didn't allow them to have their own military. Britain handled all of the defense and stuff of Singapore. So Singapore, they kind of had it going on a little bit, but they were still like, Britain is asshole. We need our fucking independence, dude. I'm sick and tired of dealing with Britain and your fucking bullshit. You guys abandoned us during World War II, and then we all shit our brains out for 2 years until you guys made us slaves again and made us fucking, I don't know how they harvest rubber. Do they cut down the tree? I don't know how that shit works, but yeah. They were like, fuck you, Britain. You fucking British asshole piece of shit. I'm not making rubber for you anymore, bitch. So they were still pretty pissed at that point. So this is where I'm getting 1963 from. In 1963, Singapore was absorbed into Malaysia. So look, we kind of all saw this coming. It was either they're at the penis tip of Malaysia, dude. Malaysia very easily could have done it at any time, but I guess this was just the time. And Singapore was like, I guess they just couldn't be independent at that point. I guess they were like, we have to be part of some other country. I don't know, maybe they thought they didn't have enough power or something. And Lee Kuan Yew was also kind of a part of this as well. He led the People's Action Party, aka PAP, and he was kind of one of the ones that helped them get absorbed into the new country of Malaysia. And I think 1963 is also when Malaysia became its own independent country. So they were like, Singapore, you guys can come on. Hop into Malaysia, dude. And Singapore they still, after all this fucking bullshit, after being abandoned by the British Empire, after being burned down by the fucking, first the Majapahit and then the fucking Portuguese, they still had that fucking feeling of being like, I want to be my own thing, dude. You have to respect Singapore. And as a Malaysian state, Singapore experienced great ethnic tensions as well as being caught in the crossfire between Malaysia and Indonesia as they fought over Borneo, which Borneo is that big old island up there, right off the coast of Malaysia. It's, well, I guess technically Malaysia is a part of it, but right off the mainland of Asia or Malaysia and Asia, that's Borneo right there. It's that big old thing, where the orangutans and stuff hang out. And I don't know. I guess Indonesia was just beefing with the fucking Malaysians because Malaysians, a lot of them are like ethnically Chinese and stuff like that. They look a lot more Chinese than the Indonesians. Indonesians, and it makes sense, right? Because Indonesia, we talked about the Majapahit Empire. They kind of got conquered by these Indian groups of people, and they were a lot darker. And they're both. I think Malaysia's a lot less Muslim than Indonesia, but Malaysia's still a pretty big. They still have a pretty big Muslim population within their country. So I don't know what the beef was over. They're both, maybe it's like a different kind. Maybe one's Sunni, one's Shiite. But the Muzzies are always gonna fight, dude. They love fighting over shit, dude. The Muslims are just girlfriends. they just love they just love getting in fights for no reason. That's kind of what the Muzzies are. So Indonesia and Malaysia were beefing, and Singapore was just caught in the middle. Like we talked about a little bit about uh how Singapore was kind of like they had Muslim influence there, but not at the same level of Indonesia and Malaysia. So they were kind of like, "Hey, dude, we're not really either of you guys, right?" They had their own native Malaysian population as well as the large Chinese diaspora in their country. So they were just like, "We're kind of both of you guys at the same time, but we're also neither of you guys." So they were caught in the crossfire between Indonesia and Malaysia, and it was also like they weren't only like metaphorically caught in the crossfire like politically, they were literally caught in the crossfire. There was like a fair amount of like bombings and terrorist attacks in Singapore at that time as Indonesia and Malaysia were fighting each other. So Singapore was like, all right, we're kind of done for you guys. So after secret negotiations with Singaporean politicians, specifically from the People's Actions Party, the Prime Minister of Malaysia advised the parliament to expel Singapore, and they did so unanimously. The vote was 126 to 0. I don't know. Maybe they felt bad from it at this point, or maybe they understood that as long as they were fighting with Indonesia, they couldn't really turn Singapore into anything significant. I don't know why they did it, but they were just like, all right, Singapore, it's sorry, sorry, all this shit happened. You guys are independent now. Uh, so now Singapore officially has its own thing going on for the first time, really ever. Like even the Kingdom of Singapura, they were still basically under the control of the Majapahit Empire, you know? So for the first time ever, Singapore finally got its wishes, dude. And credit to Singapore. Singapore, it's like that fucking Annie song. This is my opportunity. I'm putting on a show tonight, or whatever, however that song goes. That's what Singapore did, dude. They said, this is my opportunity. Black Annie or White Annie, whichever one Singapore was, it was Annie, man. And he said, this is my opportunity. Let's fucking get things going on here, dude. They did it. A lot of other countries don't do that, man. Especially in this post-colonial era, a lot of a lot of former colony countries kind of collapsed into just chaos and turmoil. And Singapore, to be fair, it's not the same, right? It's literally a city. I get that it's its own country and stuff, and I respect that about them, but it's easier to control a smaller area, even if you have less people, right? Like relative to your size, it's easier to control a small area like Singapore and control a smaller population like that, right? Like even relatively, like I'm saying. So it was a little bit easier for them, but still, not a lot of other places did it like Singapore did, especially in the post-colonial era. Which post-colonial areas, it's a funny like phrasing that people use because it's like which which post-colonial era are you talking about? There's been many in many different places. So I'll specify here and I'll say the post-European colonial era. Yeah, I think that's like the most specific I can get without making it like 10 sentences long because Europe did have other colonial eras like before that. God, fuck it. You guys know what I mean. The 1940s and 50s and 60s, basically the entire Cold War era. That's the post-colonial era that we're talking about here. In Singapore, I would say as far as yeah, I say Singapore is probably they did the best job of everyone else. They did have the easiest. No, not dissing my boy Lee Kuan Yew here. They did kind of have the easiest job, but still, they did it. Not everyone else would be able to do it, but Singapore did. Like I said, after like 700 years of just getting like fucked over by everyone else, Singapore officially had their own thing going on. So good for them. And after its expulsion in 1965, Singapore elected Lee Kuan Yew as its first prime minister, dude. The man, the myth, the legend. Julius fucking Caesar. Lee Kuan Yew entered a city of stone and left it as a city of marble, which marble is just another kind of stone, but you guys know what I mean. He entered literally, like he said, entered a fucking mud flat. They did have that big old dock from the British, but still, they they didn't have a whole lot of shit going on there. It was mostly just mangroves and fucking, macaques eating crabs and stuff like that, dude. And Lee Kuan Yew came in, he said, I don't care. I don't care what anyone says. I'm turning Singapore to the greatest goddamn fucking place in the world. And by a lot of metrics, he did. He did turn Singapore into one of the greatest cities in the world, right? Some people when I think of great countries, Singapore rules hard as fuck, but it is kind of just a city. I love the boys, love Lee Kuan Yew, all that good shit. It is kind of just a city, but it's one of the best cities. Not a lot of people can do that. Lee Kuan Yew could, though. So we got to respect our boy Lee Kuan Yew. Now we're just going to be talking about Lee Kuan Yew and what he did to really get Singapore going. I'll look up a picture real quick to see Singapore in 1964 just to like compare it from then until now. And this isn't like Dubai or whatever, right? Where Dubai was able to become this big old city because they had all this oil money from the UAE. Singapore literally built itself. So it's not really comparable to anything else, you know? Yeah. I mean, they had a little bit of shit going on. It was definitely like a pretty densely populated place, but it was nothing compared to what it is now. And it's nothing like Singapore now is on par, if not better, than places like London. Like that's how hard Singapore rules. And before it was like, I mean, yeah, I'm looking at pictures of it. It wasn't awful. It wasn't like horrible by any means, but it wasn't. It wasn't even like relatively close to where it is now. So let's figure it out, dude. How did Lee Kuan Yew do it? How did Lee Kuan Yew pull up? How did this fucking beast pull up? He's Chinese, dude. He could have left at any point and went back to fucking China, but he didn't. He said, I'm a goddamn Singaporean. God, what a fucking patriot. I love this dude. So Lee had previously led Singapore as a British colony and as a Malaysian state from 1959 until 1965. So the second Singapore got like any autonomy from the British Empire, they said Lee Kuan Yew's our guy. Lee Kuan Yew, he's that fucking. I wish I could say the N word right now, dude. I wish I fucking could, because Lee Kuan Yew is that. Yeah, he's that one, dude. He's a fucking dog. I love Lee Kuan Yew, and Singapore did too, right? Like some people have an unsavory view of him. You cannot deny what he did for this country. You know, he fucking ruled it. Even when there was no hope. Even when it was a fucking British colony, and a Malaysian state, Lee Kuan Yew was still there fighting the goddamn good fight. From 1959 until 1965, and then he hit the fucking ante and he said, "This is my opportunity." He pulled up and he showed these boys how it's done. So he was one of the founders of the People's Action Party, or PAP. We talked about this a little bit before. Uh, PAP was the first real political party in Singapore as an independent uh region, I guess is the best way, as an independent city. When Singapore was allowed to have its own political groups, PAP was basically the first one. There's another one, I think it's the People's Labor Party is the other major, but it's not really major. You know what I mean? It's PAP or nothing, It's a fucking gynecologist's office in there. It's just pap smears for pap smears for everyone. So PAP is a conservative party that has dominated Singaporean politics since its founding in 1954. So that's when it was officially founded, and it's just I'll look up a history of Singaporean prime ministers. I think every single one of them has been a member of PAP. Because I mean, they just dominated, and they were conservative. They say they're a conservative party. They're very socially conservative, but like in terms of money and stuff like that, they're pretty um they're pretty liberal with the money. They're national socialists, right? People they don't like hearing about, national socialists and how, that can be successful. But like you look at Singapore, they're a very conservative group of people. We'll talk about it a little bit, but yeah, they're very conservative. They're very nationalistic as well. That was something that Lee Kuan Yew developed specifically, like intentionally. And I just looked it up. Every single Singaporean prime minister has been a member of PAP. That's why I was talking like even more of a retard than usual. But they're very socially conservative, very nationalistic, but they're also very liberal with their money. And that was kind of Lee Kuan Yew's mission from the beginning. So let's talk about that a little bit more. Lee started his tenure by uh, basically his whole thing was getting international recognition. So he got the UN to recognize Singapore, and he made Singapore join the UN. That big old council where Gaddafi threw the piece of paper at someone's face. Singapore was there for that. All right, they watched Gaddafi do that live, and they were like, Hillary Clinton's about to kill that motherfucker. All right, they were there for that, and they also quelled international tensions. Like we talked about a little bit before, they were in the crossfire of Malaysia and Indonesia when they were fighting over Borneo. And he specifically was like, all right, we need to get fucking Indonesia on our side. And at this time, Indonesia was communist. So he's like, hey, we're not really doing the whole communism thing. We kind of are, right? Like people might call us communists. We're not really doing that whole fucking, Maoism great leap forward type of shit. Like Lee Kuan Yew, this is just how I feel. He's like who Mao wanted to be. Like that's what Lee Kuan Yew is. He's like a very nationalistic, conservative Chinese dude who like built his country up from nothing. Except I call him Chinese. He's Singaporean, man. Like people would ask him where he's from, and he would be like, they'd be like, "How do you feel as like a Chinese person?" He'd be like, "What the fuck did you just call me?" Like that was disrespect. Lee Kuan Yew said, "Put some respect on my name. All right, I ain't fucking Chinese. I'm a goddamn Singaporean." He did not play that shit. Lee Kuan Yew was about that fucking business, dude. He said, "Hey, Indonesia, we ain't playing that communist shit." But he was pretty nice to him because obviously he's like some little tiny country and Indonesia's fucking huge. So he was nice to Indonesia, but for the most part, Lee Kuan Yew was saying, "Hey, don't disrespect me like that, cuz. Hey, I'm Singaporean. I ain't Chinese, motherfucker." Very cool, dude. I fuck with him heavy. Lee Kuan Yew. And so pretty funny. after 2 race riots, so we talked about the ethnic tensions when it was like a Malaysian state in 1964. They had a big race riot, and then they had 2 race riots in 1969. Lee moved to unify the various groups in his country underneath the umbrella of a national Singaporean identity. And this is where him coming, standing on business about being Singaporean comes into play a whole lot. Because he was like, he couldn't have people fucking around like that in the situation of like trying to be like, oh, well, Lee Kuan Yew, you're Chinese. And no, I ain't fucking Chinese, all right? I'm a Singaporean. Because if he didn't set that example, why would the people of his country do that? So he was like, hey, guys, maybe some of you are this, some of you are that. I don't really know. I don't really care. You're all Singaporean now, which I very, like I started off this episode with, we need to put that shit aside and just be like, all right, it's no one's fault. We're all Singaporean now. We need to do what Lee Kuan Yew did and just be like, everyone's a fucking Singaporean. So that's what he did. He said, I ain't playing that shit. All right, you ain't fucking Chinese. You're a goddamn Singaporean now. So he did this by enforcing laws around religious and ethnic hate. He said, none of the fucking, none of the stop doing Chinese eyes. That's basically what he did. And it was also, he did not like Christians evangelizing in his country a whole lot, right? He put a stop to a lot of that evangelizing. I'm sure he didn't let the Muslims do like their public call to prayer and all that stuff. He said, hey, you wanna be Christian, you wanna be Muslim, you wanna be Buddhist or whatever, that's fine. Do it in your goddamn house. That's basically what Lee Kuan Yew did. And he also made everyone speak English, dude. And this is, they call me a racist for telling everyone to speak English, but Lee Kuan Yew does it, and he's the hero of a fucking country. God damn it. But yeah, he was basically like, hey, you might be, Malaysian or Chinese or Indonesian. You might be Muslim or Christian or whatever. I don't care. You're all Singaporean now, and you're all speaking goddamn English. He hit the OG. He hit the OG. Fucking speak English or go back to your own country. Gotta respect our boy Lee Kuan Yew for that. And he did that not only to unite them under the Singaporean umbrella, right, the Singaporean national identity, but he knew that English was like the language of the future, right? It's the language of international trade. So that's why he made them all speak English. And Lee jump-started his country's economy by focusing on manufacturing, and he convinced the British not to destroy the dry dock that they had built there. So we talked about how the British left in, what was it, 1963 is when they officially became a Malaysian state. So back even before Singapore was a country, he was like, hey, Britain, do not destroy this dock. I guess the British were going to destroy it. I don't know why they would do that. That's just kind of like a waste of time. I'd just be like, all right, keep it and figure it out yourself. I don't fucking know. Like that's what I would have done. But I guess the British, maybe they were scared Indonesia was going to take it, and then like, because Indonesia was communist at the time, and Britain, they were kind of socialist. But they weren't fully communist, and they were part of the West, and they were against communism in the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc and all that stuff. So it makes sense why they would want to destroy it, but they ultimately didn't, because our boy Lee Kuan Yew came in and he's like, Britain, don't do that. Indonesia is asshole, Britain. You're correct, but do not destroy our dock. That is kind of what our boy Lee Kuan Yew sounds like. He doesn't have full South Park Chinese accent. He does have a bit of a Chinese accent though. Or I guess Singaporean. Hey, my bad, Lee Kuan. You got a Singaporean accent, not a Chinese accent. So he was like, don't do that. Let's focus on manufacturing. And then in the 1980s, he shifted the nation's economy towards tech as surrounding countries became cheaper in regards to manufacturing. So you look at your clothes, a lot of them come from India, Indonesia, China, Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, stuff like that. And Singapore, this tiny little country, they couldn't keep up with that. Even now, I think there's less than 10 million people in Singapore. So obviously, they're not going to be able to keep up with China in terms of manufacturing, right? They don't have the manpower to make manufacturing a high GDP activity. So he was like, all right, we got to go high tech here. And he brought in, I mean, the best like economists from around the world and the best just people when it came to everything. Like that's a big thing he did that a lot of people didn't like. You know, that some people viewed it as like foreign interest coming into the country, but not, I mean, a little bit, right? Because you have to build these relationships with other countries if you're gonna, become partners with them. It was like high tech manufacturing too. It wasn't just like, writing code for Microsoft or whatever. So he brought in, I mean, just tons of people, like all the best from around the world. Like I said, he didn't give a fuck. Lee Kuan Yew, I mean, you can say he's racist for suppressing, religion and ethnic beliefs and all that stuff. He didn't give a fuck who you were, though. He was like, if you're good at your fucking job, come here and teach me how to make a decent country. So he did that. And then, in order to prevent corruption, he created the CPIB to uh, investigate accusations of corruptions. And CPIB is Corruption Prevention Investigation Bureau, something like that. But he created that because he was like, no fucking corruption. And he was, in Lee Kuan Yew, the boy is very strict when it comes to laws, right? Like, if you've ever heard of, like, you can't chew gum in Singapore or else you'll be killed, that's not true. But there's some other fucking things that are very, like, if you're caught with any drugs over like a personal amount, you would be killed in Singapore. And there's like this interview with him where he's like, "No, you die. You die now." Like he hit that shit so hard. It's so funny. He was literally like, "No." Like the interviewer was asking him, it was like some fucking British fag, and he was like, "Don't you think it's like a little extreme to kill people for that?" And he was like, "People die every day because of drugs. I'll fucking kill you." he he started going off on a rant against this guy. He enacted very strict laws. He did not let people play around like that. Like even now, if you go to Singapore, you bring the heroin or something, you getting killed, buddy. All right, Lee Kuan Yew and the other boys in PAP, they don't play about that shit. So, and I'm sure he killed a few people when it came to corruption. And this wasn't like gas chamber or like lethal injection or electric. He was hanging motherfuckers. Lee Kuan Yew said, "You get the noose, bitch." God damn, such a badass. And it's like, I don't know. If I ever did like start my, I would be doing the same shit as Lee Kuan Yew. I'd be like, the fuck did you just say to me? To the gallows, brother. You just said I'm Chinese and not Singaporean. Have fun hanging from a rope, buddy. That's what Lee Kuan Yew was doing to basically everyone. So, in addition to creating the CPIB, Lee ensured bureaucrats were paid well in order to attract talent and to prevent bribes. Because his thought process is like, all right, if we pay a dude, let's say like 300 grand a year, then he's not gonna like be willing to like lose that job and go to jail over a $10,000 bribe or whatever it is. I'm sure it's way more than $300,000 because Singapore very high GDP. I think one of the highest GDP per capita in the world. So it's probably more than 300,000, but let's just say $300,000. It's like you're not gonna risk getting fucking hanged or just even just losing your job over like a $10,000 bribe if you're paid that well. So, and this is there's like the big three things that he did that like everyone kind of they were unpopular at the time, but now everyone's like he fucking figured that shit out, and this is one of them. The big three things that he did was making people speak English, bringing in these economists to help set up this high tech manufacturing economy, and then also preventing corruption in his country by creating the CPIB and uh, paying his politicians very very well, incredible, like the best in the world. I'm pretty sure, like in terms of how much money you get from the government for doing your job, I'm pretty sure Singapore has the most high paid politicians in the world, and it's like it seems like they've been doing a decent job so far. Obviously, it kind of is all run by one party. It's kind of all run by PAP, so but still, hey, look at Singapore, man. It could be fucking worse. And it's just a city too. So I don't know, people being like, "Oh, it's a totalitarian dictatorship." It's like you can walk 5 miles and be out of it. So, it's stop your bitching, all right? Uh, and Lee also focused greatly on on maintaining the image and cleanliness of his country. That was like a big thing of his. He wanted it to be the cleanest, most beautiful capital in Asia, or most beautiful city. I guess like it's one city, so obviously obviously the one city in this country is the capital, but he wanted it to be the most clean and beautiful, and I think it is, man. Like Singapore is, he was like the one, he was the one that named it the Garden City. And if you look up pictures of Singapore, you'll see like those big like metal tree walkway type things that they have going on. That's directly because of Lee Kuan Yew calling it the Garden City. It's so beautiful, man. Like Singapore, it rules, man. Just looking at pictures of it, I get it, dude. People are getting their heads cut off for bringing in a gram of weed. It sucks. Wish that didn't happen, but like, it's what you got to do, man. Lee Kuan Yew did not play that shit. He saw what happened when you just kind of like abandon this place, right? Like when the British abandoned it, disease and malnutrition and just chaos and violence and race riots and all that shit happened. So he said, "Whoever governs Singapore must have that iron in him." It's a direct quote from it. And then after 25 years in office, so 1990, he stepped down as prime minister, and he became a senior minister, which I don't fucking know what that means at all. Maybe it's like the leader of his party, and then he became a minister advisor until 2011, and he died when he was 98 years old in like 2018. So the guy was fucking old as shit, and he was basically still running the country. It's because people wanted him to. No one was like, "Get Lee Kuan Yew out of here. Get him out of here." No, he fucking ran that shit. He ran that shit like a lesbian in a fucking McDonald's manager position, all right? Lee Kuan Yew is the fucking man. And if you hate him, I hate you. But that's all I've got for this episode, guys. Hope you enjoyed, dude. Hope you enjoyed learning about Singapore. I don't know. It's just one of those, it's just a very interesting place. Like, even if you know nothing about the history of it, it's still very interesting. It's like, it's this like little swamp island city that it's its own country. It's almost like the Venice of Southeast Asia. That's how I would describe Singapore. It's like Venice with less pickpockets, because if you pickpocket in Singapore, you get your head cut off. You get the guillotine, dude. Lee Kuan Yew will put you in that thing and fucking cut the rope himself. So, yeah, that's all I've got for this episode, guys. I hope you have a good day, /week, /year, /life, /everything. And I'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace.